Macias. I'm the General Manager of Membership, Partnerships and Strategy here at Business New South Wales, and I'll be your host for today's session. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. This is the second in our 10-part deep dive series for managing psychosocial hazards, or as we're calling it internally, the Liz and Dan Show. Thanks again for joining us. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're filming today. It's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation here in Sydney. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people joining us today, alongside the traditional owners wherever you're joining us from. Today's webinar is proudly presented by Business New South Wales in partnership with EML. As part of the Navigating Workplace Wellness initiative, this 3-year partnership is designed to help small and medium businesses build meaningful, mentally healthy, legally compliant workplaces through practical guidance, resources, and education on workplace psychological health and safety. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get underway today. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be sent out to everyone who registered to attend. It will be available to watch on demand at the end of the series. We're going to upload all 10 once we get through these weekly webinars, and that will be over at the Navigating Workplace Wellness website, which, if you haven't been to yet, is www.navigatingworkplacewellness.com. You'll also be able to revisit today's session. And if you can't join us live and you registered, you'll be able to watch the recording. We want today to be a really interactive session, so please, if you can, head over to www.slido.com, which is SLIDO.com. Use the hashtag NWW, and that will bring you over to the Q&A page. Please feel free to ask as many questions as you like. We'll try and get through all of them if we can during today's session. In the event that we're overloaded with questions and we can't, we will endeavour to get responses over to you in the post-event thank you email. Last week we kicked off this year's webinar series by exploring a question that many businesses have been asking. What does psychosocial actually mean? It was a really interesting session, and today we're building on that foundation. Our presenter today is Liz Greenwood, who is the Senior Policy Manager, Workers' Compensation, WHS and Regulation at Business New South Wales. Liz has been leading much of the work behind Navigating Workplace Wellness program, combining her expertise in workplace health and safety with a practical understanding of the challenges facing employers. Liz, welcome back.
Thank you, Dan. And I should say that internally, I think of this show as Liz and Dan, the webinar wingman show.
I like that.
So, yes, it's good to be back. And watching back on last week's video, it actually feels like we're underwater. Mm-hmm. I think it's quite apt for our deep dive series, don't you?
I do. And I think that last week really demonstrated that even getting back to basics on some of the terms on this is a really important thing, because particularly from the perspective of a small business owner, there's so much information out there, and trying to process and digest that and understand what their responsibilities are in a really dynamic and complex environment where you're trying to run your business. In many cases, you're trying to keep the lights on, but you're also trying to provide the sort of happiest and healthiest workplace for your employees. That's where series like this become really important.
Yeah. And I should say, for those who registered last week and weren't able to attend, if you're attending this week, don't panic. It's in the pipeline. We just did a couple of edits, and I had a couple of tricky questions that I'm still getting the answers to. So it won't be too long before you get last week's session. I should also say, and I should have told you this, that we've decided, because we're doing these webinars in batches, so July is 2 of the 10 series, so the refresher series, I guess you could call it. We're going to release each batch at the end of the month. So then it's sort of grouped together by topic, I suppose. Makes more sense that way.
That's great news, Liz. So for our guests, knowing that we'll probably have those videos up within a week or so up on the Navigating Workplace Wellness website. Great news.
Excellent. So we might get cracking. Welcome to number 2 of 10, the safety staircase. Now, what I will do today, I've divided it into 3 parts. I just want to do a very quick recap from last week because these build on each other, these webinars. Part 2 is the guts of this webinar, the safety staircase, and then part 3, just going over the key takeaways, what I'd like you to remember and keep in mind, and then taking your questions. And I can see some keen person has started with a question already. So I think we're going to have plenty to talk about. So
That's excellent.
Zip through these slides. So a recap from last week, and that was about psychosocial. What does that actually mean? So I explained where it came from. It came from a model called the biopsychosocial model, which was a model that explained how mental illness is caused. It drew on a previous model and added a couple of extra factors, being personality and your social environment. And work is part of a person's social environment. We suggested a simple strategy. So the guts of that model is the fact that there are a whole heap of factors which together work together. They can have either a positive or a negative effect on a person's mental health. Some of those factors are fixed, others are modifiable. So our strategy for the workplace is just focus on what's in your control in the workplace, what's modifiable. Keep in mind that they work in together, and with those factors, try and work them so the net effect is positive rather than negative, and you should be on track. And if you keep that in mind, back of your mind when you're looking at compliance, that'll hold you in good stead, I think. And we also took questions, which, as I said just earlier, some were tricky, some not so much. But rest assured, I will post answers on the website, and I'll have the little links on our thank you email. So moving on to this week, we're going to look at a slightly different way of how to manage your risks. It's how to look at the risk management process. It's still the same process. It's just a different way of thinking about that process. I'll be going through some key takeaways and then taking your questions. So, safety staircase. Now, before we embark on the actual risk management process, and this is something that Dan asked me about last week, stress. A lot of business owners and operators tend to freak out a bit and saying, well, how can I manage everyone's stress? Not a mind reader. You know, stress is natural, which it is. Stress is natural. Pretty much there's stress in every workplace of one form, shape, form, or another. It's not so much the stress, it's when stress turns into prolonged stress. It's the prolonged stress that can lead to psychological injury. So focus on identifying where prolonged stress is being felt in your workplace and work back, I guess. So where there's a little arrow there on your screen going from prolonged stress to psychological injury, get onto that first. Eliminate, or at the very least, minimize that, then work back. Try to stop stress turning into prolonged stress. So that's basically your game plan here. Now, you'll be familiar with this. I tried to pull it apart and put it back together again through some workshops last year. This was my first attempt to explain it. I personally don't think I did a very good job. So what I did was I came up with a an alternative way of looking at it as a diagram. And that's where I came up with the safety staircase concept, tried it out on a few guinea pigs in my workshops, and it seemed to land. So hopefully it will land with you today. Please provide your feedback. And if you've got any suggestions for improving it, please let me know, because everyone's on a learning curve.
Absolutely.
So let's start with our staircase. When you're building anything, you start with foundations, obviously, and our foundations here is management theory. So management theory, we're looking at stress management, leadership and culture, communication, conflict management, change management. Management theory is all about managing people. So to comply and manage your psychosocial risks, it's a two-pronged approach. You need to manage people because your workforce are people, not robots or machines. And then you have to manage your compliance obligations. The two go hand in hand. So that's why I call this the foundations of our staircase. Next, we have the frame. The frame of our staircase is corporate commitment. Now, it's really important that there's corporate commitment, because you've got to remember culture drives behaviours. So a good culture of safety, will drive safe behaviours. You need corporate commitment to make sure that not only the culture's right, but it remains that way. So if the culture's, if there's no corporate commitment and there's really no effort being made into having a safe workplace, it will quickly become an unsafe workplace. And then that drives behaviours. So, for example, if someone feels like they're being bullied, if it's a poor culture, they probably won't speak up, because they probably will think that A, the bully will get away with it, and B, the employer won't do anything about it. So corporate commitment and the strength of corporate commitment is terribly important. And in actual fact, that's what the regulator looks for. That's why in the Act, it's not just the PCBU who has a duty. Workers have a duty, people who come to the workplace have a duty, and then officers have a duty, and that duty of due diligence. So it's very important, and I just want you to think corporate commitment, the staircase. The frame's made in wood. Is yours going to be balsa wood, or is it going to be a hardwood like teak? Because it has to bear a person's weight. If it's just balsa, someone's going to fall through and hurt themselves.
Before we move on, Liz, I might just ask a quick question.
Yes, go.
Just for people that are joining us for the first time this week, because I know you explained it last week, do you want to just quickly explain what a PCBU is?
Oh, yes, sorry. That's the business owner or operator, which in WHS land is described as the person carrying on the business or undertaking, which the acronym is PCBU.
Right.
So my apologies for not explaining.
That's okay. Thanks, Liz.
Okay, let's move on. So we've done the frame for our staircase. Now, the space. The space within the frame is the risk of injury. So, top step, doing nothing. Well, that's where the most harm comes from, doing nothing. You have the furthest to fall. But the rest of the staircase is our risk management process. And as you go through each step, you're actually reducing the risk of injury as you go. So this is my way of explaining that cycle. So you've got do nothing, the top step. Then you identify your hazards. Then you identify the risks, assess the risks, identify controls, assess them, implement them, and then review them. So as you're going through, and and that is a continuous process. But as you go through that process, your workplace is becoming safer and safer. Next, we want to carpet our staircase because we want a non-slippery surface. So when you carpet something, there's usually underlay. Our underlay here is consulting with workers. Now, consultation is a duty, just like you have health and safety duties, there are duties for consultation. One of those consultation duties is to consult with workers. The reason it's there, you need to consult with workers every step of the way. So that's really important. What's also important is to understand that consultation is simply just asking for feedback. It's not inviting your workers to tell you how to run your business. What it's doing is it's recognizing that two heads are better than one, or as my father would say, a problem shared is a problem halved. It's actually getting everyone together and helping you with this process. There might be hazards that you haven't seen, you're not aware of. Likewise, there might be controls, simple controls that are practical controls. Now, the good thing about psychosocial hazards is that some of the hazards are actually, the flip side is they're controls. So someone could be a bit unsure of themselves because they're not being supervised adequately, they haven't had sufficient training. They're feeling uncomfortable, unsure of themselves, they're getting a bit uptight. No one's quite clicked onto the fact that they're uptight. Now, all you have to do to ID that hazard is to actually keep an eye out for everyone. And then the control's easy. It's increased supervision and training. And then that person feels a lot more confident and can be as simple as seeing someone not sure of themselves, going over to them and saying, hey, are you okay? Are you right? And then also remember that with the risks, it's not the same across your workforce. There are different circumstances in a workplace. There are different worker cohorts. So, for example, young people, apprentices, they might not feel confident enough to speak up when they're feeling unsure of themselves. So you just need to keep all of this in mind. People from a non-English speaking background, if you use long words, they might not understand. My partner's Italian. He grew up in Italy. He came to Australia as an adult. I'll never forget one time we were in Rome, we were in a cab, and I just started talking the way I talk in Australia with slang, and he got very cranky with me. And he said, would you please speak English? He doesn't understand you. And you just don't realise that you use slang or a shortcut or the way you speak isn't necessarily, as we would say, the Queen's English, and it's not necessarily easily understood by others who are of a non-English speaking background. So that's our underlay, consulting with workers. You're just asking for their feedback, take it on board, put everything in the mix, and then when you come back with your decision and how you intend to approach safety in your workplace, you tell them, yeah, this is what I'm going to do, and make them feel as though at least their thoughts have been taken into account. You don't necessarily have to do what they say, just consider it and weigh everything up, because at the end of the day, it's what's reasonably practicable. Right, our carpet. Now, the actual carpet is consulting again, it's consultation, the duty, but this duty is to do with your other duty holders. So other duty holders, or a number of different types of duty holders, can owe a health and safety duty in relation to the same health and safety matter. Now, this, you should note, there's the word coordinating and cooperating in there. So it's not just consulting with other duty holders. You need to consult with them. And the reason why I've made this the carpet, which lies on top of the underlay, you need to consult with your workers first. Figure out what's best for your workplace, what's the safest thing for your workplace. Then, if you have other duty holders, which you will, come onto your workplace, you need to consult with them to find out what their work practices are and then figure out how that's going to affect your workplace. Give you an example, a delivery driver delivering bread to a cafe. Now, if the delivery driver rocks up at the busiest time of your cafe and all your staff are flat chat, they're already stressed. There's not so much you can do when you have a wave of customers coming in for their pre-work coffee, if you like. But that just adds to the stress. If you simply have the conversation about, okay, what's the time of your drop off? When do you intend to do deliveries? And then find out and say, well, look, is there a way, can we make it half an hour later? Could you change it around a bit? Because you don't want to add to the stress of your staff. And that's actually turning stress, if the delivery happens all the time, into a prolonged stress. The way to deal with that is often when you're engaging your suppliers, just have the conversation, explain the way that you do your work, your procedures, find out how they do theirs, and that's where the coordinating and cooperating comes in. And it could well be, for example, on a building site, that one of the, let's say a subcontractor, does something in a particular way, and it actually is better and easier for you to rely on their system in that respect. So it's give and take, basically. So that's our carpet. And I should say that the regulator is, especially with psychosocial hazards, very keen to see that there's consultation going on, both with the workers and with the other duty holders. Right, the last step of our staircase, or the last stage of the staircase, are the handrails, and that's to make sure you don't fall off the side. Now, by that, I'm talking about other workplace laws. So, for example, you need to monitor the health of your workers, but monitoring, you need to be mindful of the fact that there are surveillance laws in place. So, yes, WHS laws say you need to monitor the health of your workers, but surveillance laws say, well, there's monitoring and there's monitoring. So we've got a lot of those other workplace laws on our website, but we're adding to it over time. Please go have a look and see what's there. I am in the process of rearranging that website because there's a lot of information there at the moment, and I think there's a better way to pull it apart and put it back together again. So always welcome feedback. So that's my safety staircase. Key takeaways. Just remember, stress versus prolonged stress. Management theory is the foundation. Corporate commitment. Are you going to be flimsy or strong with your corporate commitment? Is it going to be balsa wood where someone's likely to fall through the staircase, or is it going to be a hardwood like teak that is used on the deck of a boat and can weather any conditions? I know this sounds a bit crummy, but it's a bit twee, but I personally think it's the best way to get the message across. Compliance can be very complicated and can be quite dull and dry. So hopefully I'm making it a bit more interesting. Another key takeaway is most harm comes from doing nothing. So you've got to do something. Risk management, which is managing the risk, your health and safety duties, sit alongside your consultation duties. They go hand in hand. Cooperate and coordinate are the two extra words when you consult with other duty holders. So remember that's part and parcel of it. And also remember that there are other workplace laws out there that actually can cut over or sit side by side with your WHS laws. Now, questions. I've got a few that have come through with the registrations, but I think at this point, I'm sick of listening to my own voice, so I might throw to you,
Sure thing,
Dan.
Liz. First, thanks for a great presentation. I actually really like the the staircase. I think it's a really interesting way of being able to visualize, of really sort of, from a small business owner's perspective, a complicated set of requirements, and visualizing in a way to make sense of how the different functions interact, what's the foundation, how it comes together, and how you sort of bring the other parties into this as well. So I just want to say, well done. I think it's really good.
Thank you.
A reminder to all of our guests, please head over to www.slido.com, SLIDO.com, and use the hashtag NWW to ask questions. I can already see some coming through, which is fantastic. Yeah, please feel free to ask as many as you like, as complex as you like. If we can't answer it today, we will get back to you. I might start with one of my own first before moving on, which is last week we talked about what psychosocial is.
Yes.
This week, you've introduced the safety staircase. Why do you think this is such a helpful way for businesses to think about managing psychological risks?
Because I think with that circle, and this is just a personal thing, and I as I said, I tried it out with guinea pigs. I think the cycle thing, you are literally going in circles. It's really not apparent. It's a process. But to my mind, and that staircase is all risk management. So that's regardless, it's not just psychosocial. The beauty of psychosocial, as I said, is that often your hazard is your control. Whereas, for example, some dangerous machinery, it's a hazard, but the control is extra. You need to put a guard on. So your problem with psychosocial hazards are often your solutions. But I wanted to really focus on the consultation for that, because you really need everyone talking. I think we had a question about stigma last week. And you really need the conversation flowing and everyone feeling comfortable about talking about each step in the risk management process, and feeling, we touched on it last week again, they're safe to speak up. That's psychosocial safety to speak up.
Well, I might jump on that if you don't mind, and sort of extend that. So you've highlighted throughout the slides and last week the importance of consultation in this process. For a small business owner who hasn't done this before and they're joining us today to become sort of well equipped on how to begin, what's some simple and effective ways they could begin this consultation process and start these conversations internally with their staff?
Well, for very small business, you know, I think you could, let's say you have a particularly busy day, and I would probably draw on what's known as positive psychology. And I remember quite a while ago going to a session and thinking, oh yeah, here we go. You know, what's this? Be happy, and, you know, just, it's all sort of unicorns and glitter kind of stuff. But this lady was really, she really cut through. I must admit, she really had a good point, because she gave an example of, okay, you're picking up your kids from school. They're in the back seat. Hi, how was today? Good, good. And that it's just like trying to extract teeth, getting information out of them. I don't know if
My kids are exactly the same.
yep. So this was her way of explaining the concept. And she said, look, start with, hi guys, tell me what went well today. What was something that really went well today? And start on the positive, and they say, oh, well, I blah, blah, blah. And then get that out of them and talk that through. And then, okay, what didn't go quite so well today? And then that's giving them, they're on a roll then, and individuals are on a roll then, saying, oh, well, I wasn't too fussed about blah, blah. This client was a bit rude, or this was really busy. And then you can delve further into it and say, okay, well, why was that? And can we change things up a bit to either avoid that from happening again, or to deal with it in a better way? And then that consultation's got everyone thinking about the same thing and saying, well, I'm on the tables when they're at the coffee machine. Why don't we do it that, and come out with a practical example? So that's why it's so important. And people talk about toolbox talk, so that often happens in the construction industry. Before you start, it's a bit of a pep talk, and don't forget, today we're going to be doing X, Y, Z. Don't forget to do A, B, C. So it's basically having a conversation.
Yep. And I think that segues nicely into some of our member questions or our guest questions that have come in so far. And one of the questions we've been asking is regarding feedback and consultation. You mentioned that an employee in a bullying type workplace might be afraid to speak up. So is it the employer slash PCBU to initiate the consultation for feedback, or how do the employees start that conversation?
Well, that's a pretty good question. And one thing that is effective when it comes to bullying are your peers. So what you feel is bullying could be bullying. And if it's done in front of others, I would start by going to those others and saying, hey, am I being a bit sensitive, or was that a bit out of order? Like, I feel like I'm being picked on. So your peers, whether they're there or they're not there, I think that's a good way to start out and just sense check that scenario. And then from there, it's basically how you feel. Like you could either go to your supervisor. I mean, that's what your supervisor or your manager's there for. So go to your manager, and there's a conversation. We covered it in one of the Lysander webinars, where you say, look, this situation, so it's the SBI model. So this is a situation. When you said that to me, and give the context in front of those people, and then you said that to me, I felt that you were bullying me because I had started doing it. There was no need for you to talk like that. I felt that you felt I was incompetent, or whatever it is. But you do need to have that conversation.
Yep.
If you don't feel you can go directly to your immediate supervisor, I would be going to my peers. But then I would start by sense checking it, and if it really was out of order, find a way, take your buddy with you and say, look, we feel this is out of order.
Yeah.
And then have that conversation, and hopefully your manager or supervisor will say, well, yeah, that was out of order. If they just dismiss you, then I don't see anything wrong in taking a jump over, going the next person, escalating the matter, but don't get emotional about it. Just have that conversation about it. And if you're really not getting anywhere, then there's a hotline for Safe Work New South Wales that you can ring them, explain what happened. They will ask you, though, have you raised it with someone in the workplace?
Yeah, well, I think this leads very nicely into one of our other guest questions, which is on whom does the duty of care fall regarding psychosocial hazards? Is it just the employer, PCBU, or all employees? How does one manage if the management don't wish to acknowledge, I'm guessing, a psychologically unsafe workplace, or follow protocols because it's just too hard? For example, bullying, but the boss won't take on that bully.
Another very good question. Look, the duty of care falls on everyone.
Hmm.
It's not just employees, it's visitors to the workplace, it's the PCBU, it's the officers if they're a corporate structure. It's on everyone. And everyone has a different type of duty. So the workers you need to look after your own health, and you need to be conscious of the fact of your behaviour. Is your behaviour a psychosocial hazard for someone else? So let me give you an example. Retail. I was speaking to the retail union. I just forget, SDA. Anyway, I was speaking to one of the union reps there, and she was saying, look, a lot of the bullying is you take one step back or look at the bigger picture, and that's often the cause of the bully. Of that behaviour. So she said, in retail, basically they start out as kids. They're just teenagers, start out as kids, then they're promoted early to be a supervisor or a manager, and then they have more responsibilities and there's more responsibility from above, and they really don't handle it well. They feel that pressure, and instead of managing up, which, it's takes time to learn how to do that, they feel the pressure and then they push it down.
Yep.
And that can be bullying behaviour, but it's not necessarily that individual being a bully to that person. It's just all the work pressures have been too much and it's changed their behaviour to the others. So you really need to sort of take everything on board. Where did that question go? Because there was another part, wasn't there?
I'm not entirely sure. I think our super producer has moved it on. I think that actually leads nicely into the next question, which is, does consultation need to be formal meetings or can it be completed with surveys and individual conversations? Opening up consultation to a large team in one room could very much end up being a large group of people with unrealistic expectations of no stress ever.
Oh,
how would you handle
ridiculous.
this? Yeah.
Stress is normal, and some people thrive on stress, others don't. I worked in litigation, and I'd arrive at work as an article clerk at 8:30. I'd be handed a file and go to the Supreme Court and appear in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, I thrived on that, but that was back then. If I wouldn't do that now. If someone told me to do that, I'd say, go find someone else. You've got your different levels of stress. But yeah, I agree. If you have everyone in a room, then that could just turn into the Hunger Games, really.
Yeah.
And this is why I say management theory is a good way to go, because there's a very good management theory technique called walking the shop floor. And that's when the head honcho, or have you seen that show, The Hidden Boss or The Secret Boss?
Oh, I have.
Yeah,
Yes.
and they go undercover.
That's right.
And they work. So that's their way of seeing what happens and trying to find out what's going on
That's right. Understanding the stories of their employees.
Correct, correct. So this walking the shop floor, it's been around forever, and it's basically the more senior person just basically literally walking around the office and just having conversations, just stopping by and saying, "Oh, how are you going?" And just having those conversations. And this is where the psychosocial safety comes into play. You're having those conversations, people get comfortable with talking to the boss,
Yep.
talking to the CEO, talking to whoever, and then they'll volunteer stuff. Another old-fashioned thing is the good old suggestion box.
Yep.
Have an anonymous suggestion saying, "Look, could we?" I had one. I set up a legal call centre, and I had all these students. I was tutoring at the time, and I had all these students coming in as casual, so they're all sort of two ships in the night, as it were. And one of them said to me, "Look, Liz, some of my colleagues I know well, others I don't. Can we have a little exercise that actually brings everyone together?" And so that's when we started doing competitions like kindergarten photos, formal photos, and even though they weren't all physically there, they could sort of pull together. So there are lots of different ways to do it.
Yep.
If you can only bring everyone into a room, I think you need some ground rules, and say, look, the whole point of this is for everyone to feel safe to speak up, but show respect.
Yeah.
I show you respect, you show it to me.
Yeah.
It just depends on the nature of the people.
And I also suspect it's also a little bit related to the nature of the industry as well.
Yeah.
So for an office environment, it might be much easier to do one-on-one consultations or surveys or suggestion boxes, but on a construction site, that might be much more difficult because you might only have one or two moments to get the entire team to get their attention, or furthermore. They might not use surveys. They might be very much.
Yeah. I mean, surveys is very much a big business thing.
Mhm.
No, I think when you get to the smaller end of town, it's very much the one-on-one or the group. It's just being relaxed, having those conversations, and being open to suggestions, taking that away, coming back with your decision and saying, "Yep, I heard what everyone said. This for now is the best we can do. This is," because remember, it's what's reasonably practicable.
Yeah.
Eliminating everyone's stress is not reasonably practicable because it's inherent in all of us. So it's just, you've just got to be sensible, really. And I think a lot of management theory can really help with communication. I'm beginning to remember that earlier question now, because I was about to say management theory with communication and dealing with the bully. A lot of people are too scared to step into conflict. So there are a couple of webinars about conflict, the ideal conflict point, the different styles of people, and how to step into each scenario of conflict using a different approach and having conversations that are respectful.
So Liz, I might use as a quick opportunity to maybe ask you to talk about the content that's already on the Navigating Workplace Wellness website and what our guests can find there in the video on demand library.
Yes, so at the beginning I wrote some guides, downloadable PDFs. So there was a series of 6. That's all your WHS basics. And then there are the 3 for the psychosocial. So I've got the basics there as well. And then I've just added to it with the other workplace laws. So that's all the articles. The webinars, I pulled in a consulting firm, Lysander, Ellie Brown. She's a senior consultant there. And I got to know her through Business New South Wales. And we would just talk about it. She would talk about psychosocial hazards from a management consulting perspective, and I studied a bit at uni, and I would talk about it from the purely legal perspective. And as we converse more, we realised that that was the missing link. That a lot of SMEs don't necessarily have that training for management theory. It's how to communicate with people. If someone's being difficult in a situation, what's the best way to approach that? And there are lots of little tools and what have you out there. So we did a first series of 6 that basically did the whole spectrum. Then we did a second series of 9, and we went a bit further on each topic. So they're all on the website as well. There's a tab that says webinars. So if you just go through, it's very practical, little tools and good ways to approach things. With the second series of 9, we had downloadable PDFs so that you're not expected to remember absolutely everything. You can download that, and then that's a bit of a snapshot of what we talked about, and then a few more bits and bobs. Here are some topics for discussion with your workers. So that would help as well.
Awesome. And they're not incredibly long videos, are they?
No. So the first lot, I think they're about 20 minutes, something like that. And I think the second lot, we cut it a bit shorter.
Yep.
So I think no longer than, say, 10 minutes, I think.
Yep. So they're almost designed to be brought down into bite-sized pieces,
Yeah,
so
correct.
employers can consume them at a time that suits them, but be able to sort of focus on one particular area at a time. So Liz, one of our guests has asked, taking it back to basics, what are some examples of what you think psychosocial risks are, ones that show up in every workplace as opposed to industry-wide specific risks or hazards? And I might I might add on one of my own questions there, which is you talked a lot very early on about the difference between stress, sort of normal stresses, and consistent extended stress. So I think that probably plays into that question as well. And why is it really helpful for employers to be able to understand the difference between them?
Because that's a higher risk. If the stresses, if it's prolonged, if it's constant stress, then that's just going to wear you down and lead to injury, basically.
Yeah.
In terms of psychosocial, what do I think psychosocial risks
Yes, some examples of what you think psychosocial risks are.
All you have to do is go to the code, really, in the regs. And as I said last week, the way so psychosocial risks can be the physical workplace. So a piece of machinery that's not well maintained, that, as well as being a physical risk, is a psychosocial risk, because if you have to use that piece of machinery that's faulty, you're going to be a bit nervous that you're going to hurt yourself, and that's stressful.
Yeah.
So you've got the physical workplace and aspects of the physical workplace, noisy, dusty, what have you. That adds stress. Then you have the second batch, if you like, what I call the behaviours. And those behaviours I divide into 2. You've got your interpersonal behaviours. So that's your interpersonal conflict, bullying, harassment, discrimination. They're all quite well-known concepts. Interpersonal conflict, I mean, that's life. But there are ways of dealing with that. Again, conflict management, management theory help you with that. Then the organisational behaviour, that's the way. So we talk about the biopsychosocial model and the factors. There have been some models developed from that apply to the workplace. So there's one that's demand control model. So the demands that a person feels outside of their control and what's in their control, and if there's a mismatch for different types of people, So I gave that example. I actually quite like stress. So if I have stress, if I have demands, but I feel in control, I thrive. But if I have demands on me that are ridiculous because there's no way I can do it. So if someone came and asked me to service an engine and do it by the end of the day, well, that's just ridiculous. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And if they're insistent, then that's going to make me burr up. Likewise, I don't like getting bored.
Yeah.
So I hate sitting around with nothing to do. I have to have something to do. Other people quite like, kicking back and having a job that's a bit cruisy and they just feel on top of everything and they know what they have to do, how to do it, and then come 5 o'clock they go home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just up to everyone really. But the organisational behaviour side of things, again, it's not industry specific. Some industries have a heightened or more exaggerated version of all those types of risks. So first responders, AMBOs, police, that's pretty full on.
Yeah.
There's no way I could be a policeman or an AMBO. I personally, apart from the actual ambulance, I'm not that way inclined. I never wanted to be a nurse or a doctor or a medical person in that way or at all. And then you've got all the trauma on top of that. So I wouldn't be suited to that at all.
So if I'm to craft an example of where a psychological safety risk might be, so I'm just going to hypothesize that I work at a logistics warehouse.
Yep.
And everything usually goes great, but we have one order that completely goes off. And it's quite stressful getting it done, but we get it done and we move on. That is probably normal workplace stress. Whereas if there's a process in place that makes all orders difficult to fulfill, then that process becomes the psychological risk. It becomes the repeated stress or prolonged stressor that causes workplace injury.
And that's where you've got to work smarter, not harder. If it's simply a conveyor belt is going too fast, well, you got to dial it down. If it's the way you're doing the work, and actually Sharon Parker's done a lot of work in hospitals, where she's come up with this concept called the SMART theory, and how to look at different aspects. So if you look up SMART, SMART, or Dr. Sharon Parker, and you're in the sort of hospital type of environment, she's done a lot of work and she just goes in there and figures out how to tweak bits and pieces. But what's really important is at the beginning of the day, getting everyone together and talking about it. For example, if someone's sick. So if someone's sick and you're short-staffed, you talk about it and say, right, we're short-staffed. How are we going to manage the way today goes?
Yeah.
The best way possible. But the consultation with the logistics, I'm sure they can, if that's a one-off, I would still be inclined to pull everyone together and say, look, today was a really tough day, acknowledge it was a tough day. But if it happens again, what would we do differently? As opposed to if that happens every single day and everyone's stressed to the max, well, then you've got a problem.
Absolutely. Liz, one of the strongest message that came from your presentation today is the most harm comes from doing nothing.
Yep.
Why do you think businesses sometimes hesitate to act?
Well, if it's psychosocial, a lot of it, they don't want to deal with difficult people, what they see as difficult people. We've all got our different styles, our way of managing stress. Everyone's different. But some people just don't even want to Yeah, they don't want to mention the war because they don't want to upset that person further. Not having that conversation is the same as not doing anything, as doing nothing. Because if there's a problem and someone's raised a problem and you ignore them, that's doing nothing. So you're going to come to grief.
Yep.
Regardless. So you really need to learn, or everyone needs to learn how to get along, how to manage and accommodate the differences of each other and all get along, because at the end of the day you're all in a workplace. You're all sort of brought in together to get a result. You have to get along to a certain extent.
Yeah, absolutely. Liz, one of our guests has asked, how do you analyze feedback and decide or gauge what is a true risk that needs to be managed or individuals trying to look after only their own interests? People will have different requirements dependent on external factors. For example, working from home. It's nice to have, but it's not always feasible.
No, it's not always feasible. And that's why during the COVID shutdown, you had, you know, you had nurses, you had Coles, people, yeah, there are face-to-face jobs. You can't work from home. Ellie was giving me an example of how a young fellow, um, he wanted to work from home, but he was working on construction. And Ellie was saying, but this is construction, and your job is a physical job. We need you here, and this is where the building site is. So
Yep.
either you do it here or you go find another job. So if it at the end of the day, there's flexibility, but I think expecting to have a right to work from home when it doesn't necessarily fit. So if you're looking after a shop and you've got to open up the shop,
Yep.
you can't work from home.
But what about, and you and I were having this conversation before this webinar started. It's not just work from home jobs, is it? It's work from home people too, because there are some people, and I'm happy to use myself as a case
Oh
study
yes,
here.
yes.
I just can't work from home. I don't enjoy it. I need to be around people. I need to be around the work that I'm doing. I thrive in environments where we're all working, and I love listening to other people on what they're doing and sort of using that to help shape my decisions and my thinking. I find working from home to be boring, bland. And is that something that we need to accommodate as well, sort of in the thinking?
Oh, I think so. Again, it all boils down to the type of work you do,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it boils down to how you feel most productive. So I personally
Mm-hmm.
feel most productive. Well, I have to do a lot of thinking and writing, and I can't do that if there's a lot of noise around me. I need to be in the zone and get things done. So that suits me better. But if you're in a team, and I'm in a team as well, and yesterday we had a team meeting, we were talking about the election.
Mm-hmm.
So we were all sitting around the table just talking about it and feeding off each other. And there's no way we could have done that if even if it was a virtual meeting.
Yep.
So there are times where I think someone was saying, oh, they just think of their own interests. And I think that's the problem. You've got to be realistic. It's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a job that you applied for. That's part and parcel of what you went for, and what's expected of you. So you it's a two-way street. You don't just say, well, I want to work from home to look after my dog, so I should be able to work from home. That just doesn't cut the mustard, because you're doing a job. But if you've got a sick child and you say, well, look, I've got a sick child, I have to be at home. I have something to write, and I can just sit down and write it and prepare it, then yes, you can.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street.
Absolutely. Liz, I've just realised it's 12:58,
Oh my goodness.
and we have been so engaged in the question and answers coming through. It's actually now 1 p.m. We've got 3 questions that I can see on the screen, and I might ask you to do a quick speed round on those, and we'll see if we can get to them. If they require more detailed answers, we can cover that on the Navigating Workplace Wellness website.
Building manager capability and confidence. I asked SafeWork New South Wales to provide training and coaching, and they have. So I will put a link to that in the
thank you email.
The thank you email. Psychological injury risk assessment. Do I use that? No, I don't. There are quite a few risk assessments, but you know, I think that's something we will be looking at, is actually putting out there where you can go. You know, that's part of this project. I haven't got it out there yet. Regarding feedback and consultation, bullying type work, afraid. Oh, I've answered that one. The true risks that needs to be met, I've answered that one.
We've answered that one. And the last question is, will this series cover the ladder of inference tool?
It's already on one of our webinars.
Excellent.
I will put a link to that particular one in the thank you email.
Excellent. Liz, thank you so much for a really, really, really good session today, and for doing the speed round at the end there. We wanted to try and make sure that all of the questions got an opportunity to be asked.
Well, I've got some that came in with the registration, so I'll do that as well with our email.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the end of today's session. Liz, do you want to tell us a little bit about the next session?
We're starting our deep dive. So August is a deep dive into workplace behaviours or organisational behaviour as opposed to interpersonal behaviours. So that's next week, is business systems, I believe.
Excellent. I really look forward to that one, because I'm really enjoying these sessions. It's great content, and I'm really pleased to see so much engagement from our guests. So please do feel free to join us next week. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, and thank you for indulging us in running a few minutes over to get those last questions done. Please join me in thanking Liz Greenwood for her excellent session today, for imparting her expertise on this, and for taking the time to deep dive into these individual issues. We hope you've drawn a lot of value from today's session, and don't forget that you are going to get a copy of this in the post-event thank you email from Business New South Wales. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks for joining.
Thanks.